In the northern part of France is a bay that looks like a vast wasteland. In the midst of that wasteland is what's seemingly a rock. And on that rock sits what looks like a kingdom during medieval times. That place is known as Mont Saint Michel. And the crown jewel of Mont Saint Michel is without question the Abbey. Hey, welcome back. In this second part of this three-part video, I'm going to feature the Abbey in Mont Saint Michel. It's this church that sits on the top of this rock, essentially, and it's amazing. Allegedly, the Archbishop had a vision, and because of that vision, he built this church. Whatever reason he built it, it's amazing, and you'll totally like it. So let's get into it. In the previous video, I skirted the perimeter of Mont Saint Michel. In case you missed it, click the card on the screen to take you to part 1 of this 3-part video. In this video, I made it a point to check out the Abbey properly. The Abbey is the church that sits on the top like a crown jewel of Mont Saint Michel. You can't visit this place without making a visit to the Abbey. And why wouldn't you want to? This structure is absolutely magnificent with its towering steeples and massive stained windows. The Abbey looks down on the local village, which is another discussion altogether. We'll get to the village in the last part of this 3-part video. Back to the Abbey. Looking out at the base of the Abbey affords you some spectacular views of the bay of Mont Saint Michel. You can look out for miles and only see desolation and barren land. The Abbey stands out because it's the tallest structure in the area. You can see it from miles away. The common way to approach the Abbey is obviously from the front. This is the way most crowds approach. However, I tend to do things a little bit differently, which means I approach from the opposite direction. I believe the direction I came from was more interesting. It consists of narrow passages and multiple flights of stairs. Because I visited in the winter, the crowds were small, which meant there would be no waiting in line. The entrance to the Abbey had a very castle-like feel to it. Before I entered, I took a moment to gaze at the massive size of the church. The entrance led me to this corridor. It made me try to imagine what it was like to be here during the days of Napoleon. As I walked the passageway, I admired the craftsmanship of the structure. It was amazing how much stone they used to create Mont Saint Michel. At the end of the corridor was the actual entrance to the church, but before I went through it, I took a quick look back from where I came. The entrance to the church led me into this magnificent courtyard. It had another amazing view of the bay. I spent quite a few minutes just admiring the view. Then I walked towards the edge to check how far down I could see. I could see to the base of Mont Saint Michel. And while I'm enjoying this incredible view of the bay, why don't you go ahead and click the subscribe button to catch more of my awesome videos. There's a new video on the 15th and the 30th of every month, and I know you don't want to miss that. And you might as well make it a twofer by smashing that like button. I really appreciate it. Now that I'm done self-promoting, back to the video. Finally done messing around the courtyard, it was time to head inside the church. The back of the church was somewhat plain when compared to the grandeur of what was inside. I made my way through the door, not quite knowing what to expect. The door led me to a church hall with lots of benches. While I made my way towards the front, I just happened to glance up and admire the architecture. The oversized windows allowed in ample light, and I could tell that the walls, with its vaulted ceilings, would reverberate if there was a choir here singing. And the highlight of the building was quickly coming into view. Of course, I know nothing about this type of architecture, but at the expense of sounding ignorant, let me just say that the rotunda-like area was magnificent. Light shined down from all directions because of its massive windows. And at the center of the rotunda was the altar. I could tell that they took their time while constructing this church. The amount of detail they put into it was incredible. After spending some time in the area, I made my way towards the back. Towards the back were these private-like areas. It looked like they were set up for individuals that wanted to pray in private. I went into one for a closer look. At that moment, the lighting was quite surreal as the sun pierced through the stained glass. After admiring, I gravitated towards the cross. After a few moments, I moved on to the next area. Each little corner had its own bit of uniqueness to it. I took a moment to enjoy the different areas. Then I paused for a moment of silence. Outside the cathedral was a beautiful courtyard that hosted splendid views of the abbey. I took a moment to enjoy before proceeding into the next chamber. In the chamber right next to the courtyard was a rather large room with one single table. It seemed like a waste of space. Again, the placement of the windows seemed to let in just the right amount of light. I spent a few minutes admiring the room. I proceeded downstairs to see what else this place had in store. These rooms below were opposite of the cathedral I entered initially. These rooms were considerably darker. If it wasn't for the stained glass window, I would have thought I was in a tomb. At last, I had exited the cathedral and moved on to some of the neighboring buildings. I was led out into a narrow passageway. I could tell that it would be easy to get lost here if you were allowed to explore every nook and cranny. The inside of the building only became darker from this point on. Thank goodness there were a few windows. This would not be a good place to be for those that easily become depressed. From this point on, I had just about seen it all. I made my way through a series of passages and hallways headed towards the exit. I started to feel like a rat going through a maze. In this area of the abbey, they definitely should have added a few more windows to lighten up the place. Moments later, I found myself exiting a building to an area that placed you in the back of the abbey. It was a beautiful grassy courtyard. It was a welcome retreat from the dismal, dreary place that I had just left. As you leave, you walk with the abbey on one side and an amazing view of the bay on the other. On a nice sunny day, this would be a great place to just sit and relax. Next stop was the exit, which essentially lets you out where you started. Totally amazing church. It is so worth it. When you come here, I suggest that you plan 2 or 3 days just to check this place out thoroughly, because there's so much to see, and the church is magnificent. Go in the winter time, because in the summer the place is a madhouse. Good job.